This is Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Fantastic, man. Here at Identiverse 2025, so much to talk about. We've done Identisquabble last night. We did a podcast with the Savian folks today, this
Savvy
morning.
Talks. Shout out to Enrique and David Lee.
I can't wait till that comes out. I'm really excited to watch that.
And yeah, they make their their whole recording studio is way better than what we're doing here.
Yeah,
much more professional, but it was fine.
We're
fine. We're doing okay, guys.
We also had Identibeer, and I just got my Umbrella Associates Authara beer. So I'm excited
From
to drink
Sebastian,
it.
right?
From Sebastian and Roland. Yeah.
Do you know what Umbrella Associates is? Do you know what the nod is to that?
No, I don't, but I know there is one.
It's a video game tie-in.
Okay.
But that's also their company. But yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like Umbrella Labs or something, or
something like that. Umbrella Corporation or whatever. I'm not the expert, but I know it has something to do with Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we're here at Identiverse, live on the show floor. So thanks to RSM and Identiverse and other stuff for getting us here and setting up with
CRA for sponsoring, basically giving us this awesome space.
Yeah. So definitely appreciative. We might have people just walk up to us and talk in the middle of us recording here an episode, but we'll deal with it like we always do live. But why don't we jump right into it? We've got our guest. We were trying to figure out, is this like the 10th, 11th time? Andrew Shikiar, part of the FIDO Alliance here, Executive Director and still CMO? CEO, okay. Welcome, I guess, back for the 11th.
Thank you, yeah. I can't be here enough. It's great to be here. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start with, what have you been up to? So you've got Authenticate Con coming up here in a couple months, but what's new in the world of FIDO?
More of the same, right? So we're very focused on pushing Passkey adoption. Since we talked last, more Passkeys are enrolled. We're seeing good progress overall, right? So, FIDO's mission is to reduce the world's reliance on passwords, right? And passkeys are a better alternative than passwords and legacy forms of MFA. So I just gave a talk earlier today, shared some updated numbers, and we estimate there's over 15 billion accounts that can use passkeys. In reality, probably 2 billion plus are in active use today, which is a very big number, right? So a lot of people are using passkeys, which is fantastic. And we just introduced this concept around 3 years ago, which in one way sounds like a long time, but in other ways it's really not that long, right? So 3 years ago, when we introduced the term passkey, we introduced two things. One was the ability for the private key and the FIDO key pair to be securely synchronized and readily available across devices, which is
huge. It was a
very fundamental shift. It is huge and also contentious. I was at this very same conference where people were up in arms about this, also excited but also concerned, and both were legitimate, right? Good reason to be excited, also good reason to be concerned.
What was the concern?
Well, the concern was that it is changing the FIDO security model, letting the private key, leave the device for the first time. But we do that in the name of usability, all right? And so we can come back to that in a second. So we introduced Passkey as doing that, but also for the first time having a brand and a logo program associated with FIDO. All right, so people have been doing WebAuthn and FIDO2 for years, but there wasn't any commonality to it, right? And every site had a different way of telling you what you're doing. And so by one, pivoting towards making passkeys more FIDO, more usable, and two, giving them a name, we set the stage for where we sit today, which is where 75% of consumers are familiar with passkeys.
That's great.
75% of people, if you ask people, have you heard of a passkey? More people will say yes and no, which is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So on a couple fronts, one, it's great because now companies that are thinking about deploying passkeys can do so with confidence, right? The early adopters are, well, how am I going to explain this to people? Are people going to know what's happening? The fact of the matter is, the answer now is yes, because most people are at least familiar with it, more likely have used a passkey on another site. The other benefit on a personal level is that I don't need to explain what my job is to people. I meet people, I can explain what a passkey is. Because generally, if you say, well, I lead a standards organization, no one knows what that means. But if you say, yeah, I'm helping get rid of passwords in favor of passkeys, everyone's like, oh, yeah, I get that. I like passkeys. So, yeah, there's a lot of awareness of passkeys, and we're seeing good adoption across the board. I think one of the most exciting things that's happened so far this year is that we're seeing major banks support passkeys. And I think when we look back in 2025, so if you interview me in January 2026, I'm going to predict now that 2025 is the year that passkeys hit banking. So a very big moment here in the U.S. is when Wells Fargo rolled out Passkey support. So if you are a Wells Fargo customer, you can use passkeys to sign into your account, whether it's your native app or on the desktop. That's huge. That's huge because it goes back to the point I was talking about earlier, which was a concern around syncability. And the feedback was, well, look, banks are never going to use passkeys. They'll never do this. Well, they are, right? They understand they still need to do some added signaling and things like that, to have higher assurance on top of async passkey. But you can do that, right? And that's not holding people back. And I think that's very exciting. So that's what we've been up to. The other thing we're working on is like other things we can do to add added signals within the passkey sign itself for higher assurance scenarios. Those are things we're working on, and we'll continue to progress inside the Alliance over the next year or so.
So I see like this, the syncing thing is such a big deal for me because I use so many different devices. And I remember when this first came out, I was like, oh, this is great. Yeah. And then I was like, wait, why do I have like 8 different passkeys? Because I have 8 different devices. And so I understand the security implications of it. But what good is security if there's no usability and nobody adopts it? So I understand the reason for the concern. But as a consumer of this, look, it makes my life so much easier, which makes me want to use it more, which at the end of the day makes me more secure.
100%. That's exactly it. And so like having to enroll every device for every service it's a non, like we were hearing this from relying parties, like it's a non-starter. It also almost forces like a recovery process every time someone wants to enroll a passkey. And so it's almost counterintuitive or counterproductive in the sense that like if you have to enroll every device for every service, you're keeping that password front and center for someone to enroll. And with now that you have the passkeys syncing, you don't need to do that. You can start putting the password further and further in the background, and then get rid of it entirely. And of course, companies like Microsoft are letting consumers ditch their password, or new accounts are signing up without a password at all. And that's the goal, right? Our mission as an alliance is to reduce or eliminate the world's reliance on passwords, and passkeys are doing that. Full stop.
You mentioned the private key leaving the device. Give us the quick and dirty version of that.
Well, so historically, you have a device-bound key, so that the private key never leaves the device, and the user, when you are going through part of the authentication ceremony, you're verifying yourself to that device, and the private key is there, and then once you're verified, the private key talks to the public key on the server, and the private key always stays in that device. So with passkey, synchronization, that private key can essentially be securely managed in the cloud environment. So say it's an OS cloud like iCloud or Google Cloud or Dashlane or 1Password or one of these guys, and then it's readily available wherever else you have those clients, right? So in the Apple example, it would be on my iPad, my MacBook, my other iPhone, whatever it might be. It's there, right? And so then when it comes time to sign into that new device, I enter my depending on the setup and the flow. I may have a first step where I enter in my username. I may not need to do that. And then when it comes to sign in, I just automatically have the passkey there. And I still need to verify myself using the on-device biometric or on-device, whatever the screen unlock may be, a biometric or a PIN or a security key. But then the key's there. And so from a usability standpoint, then from the average consumer, it's the same thing I'm doing to unlock my device as what I'm doing to sign in anywhere.
Yeah, right. I mean... But is that always the way that passkeys have worked?
In the sense that, you're using the device unlock, right? And so when you ask your average consumer, how do you sign into things? They'll say, how do you sign into sites on your phone? They'll say, I use Face ID. They won't say I'm using a password manager. They won't say I'm using passkeys. Or they think about the interface, which is the device unlocks the interface. That's what most consumers deal with, whether if you're on iPhone or Android or your PC. That's what they contemplate. And then the passkey sits behind that.
Yeah. So you also talked about signals becoming more a part of the safe way to adopt passkeys for organizations that have concerns about that. Talk to us a little bit about what you're envisioning there. Is that really kind of where FIDO Alliance is going, or the FIDO standard?
No. So I think when you think about authentication, right, or in general, it's always been about signals. How much do you trust a sign? How much do you trust a device-bound passkey? Most banks, larger, like high assurance organizations will have all sorts of risk modeling and risk engine and risk signaling. And it's a matter of, how much they lean on one signal over the next, right? And So I think that there are passive signals, there's active signals, there's all sorts of vendors, of course, in this ecosystem that provide different sorts of data to service providers for them to make their own decisioning on, right? So these things feed into a risk engine or a decisioning engine, which then grants access or not, or maybe it triggers a anomaly or it triggers a step up or things like that. So it's all about balancing signals. So something we're working on inside of FIDO Alliance are ways to actually embed added signals as part of the passkey sign in itself, right? So we're working on something called Trust Signal Framework, which will be a framework that will be supported in operating systems that allows very strong signals about the passkey to be embedded in that actual passkey sign-in. So we're establishing both a framework and we'll be specifying some actual signals that a high assurance RP can use and lean upon to have higher confidence, primarily for the new device use case. All right, so we talked about Wells Fargo, for example. Wells Fargo right now, they're doing a one-time binding for me to set up my passkey. But when I'm on my same device, they know it's me, and there's a high, they have the high degree of confidence that it's me. Now, when I go to a second device with any service, that's where you enter in. Some risk is introduced, and that's where I think our ability to add more data with that sign-in is going to add a lot of value to these higher assurance scenarios. And so that's what we're focused on with this concept of trust signals, which is something we're actively working on inside of FIDO Alliance.
Is that something that you're working specifically on FIDO Alliance, like you said, or are you working on a conjunction with shared signals framework and some of the other open standards that are being developed?
Working on it inside of FIDO Alliance, and of course we interact with other standards bodies across the board on everything. But so it's not tied to the shared signals framework, but there's obviously some parallel concepts.
Do you think this might come together at some point, or I know there's sometimes a little bit of competition, but
it's not no competition. But we always look at building joint use cases with other standards bodies, and we work very collaboratively with OpenID Foundation, W3C, and groups like that.
Here's my vote for SSF. Mm-hmm. So, Sean, if you're listening, I got you.
Well, let's talk about the signals again a little bit more. Where do you see these signals coming from?
Well, so it's still work in progress, right? And so, again, we're focused on establishing the framework and then understanding what signals we want to provide. And I think, one could envision FIDO Alliance creating some signals. Perhaps there's information that, say, platforms may have about users, about their devices, maybe about the phone numbers. There might be things like that we may be able to specify. And there may be a framework that other people can bring a signal into. So it's still work in progress. And, I think we'll be able to talk in more detail about this probably next time we connect.
All right. Well, if I get a vote, one of the things that I was so impressed about with FIDO Alliance is your ability to bring all these big tech companies to the table to build out the standard for passkeys.
Yep.
How about they come to the table and start sharing the signals that they have with each other and with the smaller companies that obviously don't have the scale and have the infrastructure to kind of build the millions and millions of accounts that have been compromises or devices that have been compromised, things like that.
Well, I think that's part of the idea, right? So, and we're very fortunate that we have the stakeholders sitting around the table that you're talking about, and I think that's why we've been successful. And there's a lot of information that platforms have, and OS vendors have about users and about the passkeys that they should be able to provide to the higher assurance RPs, right? And so I think that's a very natural conclusion, actually, is to leverage the signals that the platforms are getting as part of this output.
We're lucky having this platform to give feedback, but how can others give feedback? How can other people give feedback? Be involved in this process?
Well, we are an open organization, so anyone can join FIDO Alliance and take part in it. And I think generally, always happy to engage with individuals if they have ideas about things that FIDO needs to do. I'm always happy to talk to people. But we have our membership's growing. We have 300 plus members right now, and they all take part in the Alliance and different working groups and things like that. We have our member meetings 3 times a year. We have Authenticate in October. Authenticate's a great chance to lean in, meet a lot of these key stakeholders, and bring ideas to the table. We also liaise with other .orgs. Right? So I mentioned we work with OpenID Foundation, W3C, and a whole bunch of different adjacent standards bodies to make sure that we're addressing use cases together and educating each other's constituents on what we each have to offer.
You mentioned the Authenticate conference, which I love. It's one of my favorite conferences of the year. It's coming up in October.
Yep.
It's in the same place it's been for the last couple of years, Carlsbad.
Yep.
Southern California in October
Beautiful.
is Chef's Kiss, right? What can we look forward to this year? Is there a theme that's been developed yet? Like, what are we trying to get out of this?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So Authenticate, first of all, it's fantastic. I encourage everyone to come. It's a very unique environment, very collegial, very warm. One of the really cool things about the FIDO community, and you see this in spades at Authenticate, is this, and it sounds cheesy, but there's truly a sense of community, and everyone wants to help each other.
It's not cheesy, because not every industry is like this.
It's true.
And look, we're in cybersecurity at large, but we're in identity and access management. And the identity and access management community is amazing.
It is.
People walk up, introduce themselves. Yes, we have competitors and products and blah, 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 right? Everyone has that.
Yeah.
But the willingness to share and bring new people into this is such a great thing. I've met so many new people at this conference already.
And there's also, with passkeys, there's also a realization that it's in everyone's mutual interest for everyone to be successful. Right? If someone does a really crappy passkey implementation, someone has a crappy passkey experience, they're not going to use passkeys next time. Right, so everyone wants everyone else to be successful with how they roll this out. And every vendor wants the vendors to be successful in helping their customers out too. So there is a sense of community, a sense of purpose, a sense of mission that's very pronounced at Authenticate. So anyone who's interested in, you have use cases, you need help, and this is a great chance to come and learn. So I think there'll be a lot of that. One piece of feedback we got from Authenticate last year is, okay, yeah, we know passkeys are great. So we don't need, 75 case studies hearing about passkeys are great, passwords are bad. So what we're doing, and we're building out the content, is be a little bit more nuanced this time, right? So not just success story after success story, but look more into data, look at some adjacent use cases, look at, some different challenges, different deployment scenarios, and also look at adjacencies, right? So how are passkeys relating to, we have a new payments initiative, how are passkeys relating to payments and digital credentials, and some of the spaces that we're now moving into as FIDO Alliance, we'll be talking about a lot of that as well.
Yeah. I'm so interested to know about the how signals can combine with passkeys. Are there real use cases out there in the wild happening? And will we maybe get some real life stories?
Yeah, I think we're seeing passkeys used for payments and other spaces, and I think we'll see some of those stories certainly at Authenticate, and a lot of those stakeholders will be there as well. And the other space we're very interested in understanding is how does FIDO play in the broader digital credentials landscape? And this is something that we're actively seeking feedback on. You mentioned the cast of organizations we have in FIDO Alliance. I think it's those companies that have helped us be successful, right? The fact that we have really everyone sitting around our virtual table that needs to be sitting around the table to solve the password problem. Can they also do work in wallets and credentials? We think so. And so we're actively engaging with that broader community to see how can FIDO add value here? Right? What technology can we help build? Like our CTAP protocol, for example, is very well suited for credential presentation. It's being used that way already. We're expanding and building, innovating upon that to make sure that it's very fit for purpose for credential presentation. But our certification program, for example, can we, is there certification work for us to bring into this community? The work we've done around usability, UX testing, and branding and design, is there expertise we could bring there as well? So these are discussions we're actively having right now, and we'll be having between now and October. And I think we'll have more to share at Authenticate as to where that stands.
They were focused on growing the conference from a quality or a quantity perspective. In other words, do you see it doubling in size? How do you maintain the quality of the conference and the discussions and all the things you've been talking about?
Yeah, I think we'll continue to grow. We do want to grow the conference, but keep it at the right size. So it's like Identiverse, right? It's always going to be kind of a content first conference where people come to learn and network. So I think we had around 700 people on site last year, maybe 600. We're going to grow probably 800 this year, 900. And so we want to grow, but also make sure that the content's really sharp. But the other thing we hear from our attendees is that they like being with each other. Right, the networking is very important, and the hallway cons as important as the sessions. And so we create opportunities for people to network and people to meet and do all that. And so I think we'll continue to grow in that regard, and also have it be a fun conference. It's fun, So last year we introduced Family Feud or FIDO Feud, and I know you rolled that back here at Identiverse and with this identity squabble. So we'll continue to innovate with things like that at Authenticate and make sure it's a fun place for people to enjoy themselves and learn at the same time.
One makes it fun and with the education, for sure. What I was wondering is, Authenticate did have a little bit of an international flair, but passkeys are global, right?
Yeah.
So talk to that for a little bit. Like, what else are you guys doing outside of the North America market?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jim. So we're actually going to introduce Authenticate APAC, most likely. We've not announced this publicly until now, so consider this a most likely announcement.
We got about a month to get your ducks in a row.
Yeah. So we're targeting May of 2026 in Singapore to have our first Authenticate APAC conference. And so, as a membership, we meet 3 times a year, once in the Americas, once in Asia, once in Europe. And the way actually Authenticate was launched is it was appended to our member plenary in the U.S., and it still is. Our member meeting is timed with Authenticate. And so we'll take the same model, but bring it to Asia. So our member meeting in Asia will be in Singapore, and we'll have probably a 2-day Authenticate conference and a 2-day member meeting separate. In fact, the past 2 years, we've had what we call the FIDO APAC Summit. One was in Vietnam and one was in Malaysia. Both were very well attended. We had around 300 people attend both. Lots of sponsors. There's a lot of activity in Asia, especially in Southeast Asia around FIDO. A lot of emerging activity in those countries. So we're very excited to actually apply the Authenticate brand to that and really start building on this momentum in that part of the world.
Well, do you notice differences throughout the different regions? Like you mentioned APAC, right, and the North America and Europe. Are there differences that you've noticed from like an adoption or style of adoption or kind of regional things like that, where it's like, oh, this region really likes this, or this has seemed to work here, but it doesn't work elsewhere?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're seeing adoption across the board, and Japan's fascinating, right? Some of the earliest adoption was in Japan through NTT Docomo. They were kind of one of our early flagship RPs, and the Japanese market has really accelerated over the past 2 years, and a lot of it's being driven by government. And so we have a seminar in Tokyo every December, and 2 Decembers ago, the head of digital agency in Japan, spoke about passkeys, and they were kind of very cautious, like, this is interesting, and still need to see. Meanwhile, they've basically done a full embrace of passkeys now in Japan because they're seeing all these threats emerge. They're seeing the usability, the benefits of passkeys, and it's being proven out by some of the earliest adopters of passkeys worldwide are in Japan with Docomo, Line, Yahoo Japan, and they've had great success. And so, through this success in industry, we're seeing government embrace this also with, e-citizen services and also pushing industry to adopt passkeys to protect themselves from the ongoing growth of attacks. So, Japan's one market that had very early adoption of FIDO, a little, cautious on passkeys, now is going full bore. In Southeast Asia, we're seeing a lot of interest in the work we're doing around identity verification. Right, so looking at we have a certification program for face verification for more secure onboarding, and a lot of the governments there and the regulatory bodies are looking at pointing towards this as part of their own regulatory regimes. All right, so if you're going to do online banking, you need to onboard people using a certified method, and we have a certification program that fits that. So I can't generalize, but it is interesting to see how different regions adopt in different ways. Sometimes it's driven by government, sometimes by industry, but what it always requires is some sort of flagship service, kind of being that flag bearer to help generate awareness and drive adoption.
I feel like every time we talk, this topic comes up and I ask you because I'm always curious if something has changed or anything like that. So I appreciate you taking answering it the way you do, because I think there's so much more that we can be doing as an industry from an adoption standpoint. But having just been at EIC for the first time, it exposes me personally to things that I normally wouldn't see as someone in the U.S. or North America or whatever it may be. So I'm always curious what those stories are that work internationally, because I think we can learn some of that and bring that back and say, okay, well, we've seen this work elsewhere. Right. And maybe we tweak that on our messaging on our side to say, okay, why aren't more people using passkeys, or how can we accelerate the adoption is probably a better way to put it, because it's here.
It's here. And so I think Europe has some regulatory challenges. So I get a question a lot about PSC2 and how does FIDO, fit, how does passkeys fit with PSC2? And, we're actively engaging with the regulators there to make sure they explicitly contemplate passkeys as they update those regulations. But we have banks deploying in Europe as well, right? So Abanca in Spain and Bank ID Norway. There are banks deploying in Europe, and we're seeing a lot of interest from central governments there as well in FIDO in general, and our certification programs also.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show today, and I hope this background noise only enhanced the episode.
Yeah, we're live on the floor. I mean, we no one like jumped in the middle of this or like threw anything at us.
Yeah.
I was waiting for like a pie in the face or something, like nothing, like the face is unmarred for those watching. So yeah, all good.
Yeah. So thank you again for taking time with us. What's next for you here in Vegas? So we'll kind of wrap things up with that. Like, do you have more dinners, dances, gambling, shows?
No dances, no comment on gambling. I have another night here. So I had a nice session earlier on today. One thing that's always cool about, being at Identiverse and talking about FIDO is that our sessions are always packed. Yeah. And I'm not trying to be arrogant, but like the Passkey sessions yesterday that Megan and team did were packed, and my session today was packed. It's just awesome to see how much interest there is in what we're doing. We don't take that for granted at all, and we appreciate people actually tuning in and wanting to hear what we're up to. So we have more sessions this week. There's a UX session tomorrow. There's some other master classes. So we have a couple more pieces of content here at Identiverse, and lots of networking and meetings, and maybe a little bit of carousing as well.
But you have some fun. I mean, you have balance in all things, right?
Fun.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go ahead and wrap it up, I think, for this week. We'll have a link to your LinkedIn profile in our show notes, as well as FIDOalliance.org. Definitely big supporters of you guys' organization. I think I'll have to count, but 10th or 11th time, you're always so great for your time. So appreciate it. And you can find us on the web, idacpodcast.com. Like and subscribe, do all that cool stuff. And we'll talk with everybody in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.